During the 5th series of tropical trials conducted by the Army Design Establishment, 2 prototype models, W1 and W14, of the British Armoured Personnel Carrier FV432, now known as Trojan, were subjected to a series of tests under hot wet and hot dry conditions in northern Queensland. The trials were staged by the 5th Tropical Trials Unit, assisted by members of A Squadron, Queensland Mounted Infantry. A test circuit was established in the Berners Creek area near Innisfail to test the carriers to the maximum. This circuit contained creeks and many gradients. The wild nature of the terrain with its trees and their roots provided a severe test of the vehicle's steering and suspension. American armoured personnel carriers of similar type and purpose were included in these trials. More than 1,000 miles were covered over muddy tracks in the Innisfail area. Heavy rains made the clay soil slippery at first. Several passes turned the surface into mud up to 18 inches deep. Average speeds were from 4 to 6 miles in the hour, depending on conditions. Steep gradients provided opportunities to assess the effectiveness of the tracks on the APCs under difficult muddy conditions. The Trojan was found to suffer from lack of traction under these muddy conditions. Items mounted on the sides of the APC were wiped off early in the trials and were thereafter carried within the vehicles. Antenna rods frequently broke during the trials. Mudguards and headlights also suffered damage on Trojan W14, and to overcome this, the lights were mounted further up the glacis plate. To simulate the holding of vehicles under tropical conditions, the Trojan prototypes underwent a storage period of 14 days deep in the jungle. A meteorological station was set up at the site. During the period of jungle storage, 14 inches of rain fell. On each carrier, a continuous recording thermohydrograph was installed in the passenger compartment of the vehicle to record temperature and relative humidity. The rear door of each carrier was opened once every 24 hours to replace the graph paper on these instruments. Trojan W14 was left uncovered during the storage period, whilst W1 was covered with a tarpaulin. No major deterioration occurred during the storage period, but all hatches leaked badly, and this adversely affected items stowed in the uncovered vehicle. Deterioration would probably have increased if these vehicles had remained uncovered for a longer period under these conditions. Before this jungle storage trial commenced, both vehicles were completely serviced and seals were cleaned to ensure that hatches closed properly. After the trial, the interiors were carefully examined for the possible presence of fungus growth and the serviceability of all equipment. In the uncovered vehicle, water had collected in the floor wells, although drain plugs had been removed. Water entered the ventilation air cleaners and damaged the filter elements. Water had also collected in the fuel filter of W14. No difficulty was experienced in starting the carriers before they moved from the storage site. This forest track provided a convenient exit from the storage site, but caution was necessary in crossing the narrow timber bridge. Later, W14 was bogged and had to be recovered by a bulldozer. After short jungle runs, leaves and debris collected on the radiators. A close mesh grill was later fitted to prevent leaves falling inside. This Ramey member is explaining the procedure for lifting out the power pack of the Trojan with the aid of a recovery vehicle. The engine had to be lifted on many occasions during the trials. Leads from the rear of the carrier enable the engine to be run for limited periods outside the vehicle. During the trials, power tools with which the carriers are equipped were tested. Here, a rock drill is used to break up a bed of lava. During the closed-down trials in these hot, wet conditions, the physiological reactions of crews operating the armored personnel carriers and the troops carried in them were studied under careful medical supervision. There were few complaints about discomfort from the troops, and no medical attention was required. Limited swamp trials for the vehicles were conducted. A check of the vehicle's performance in this type of going was considered essential in view of the extensive swamp and paddy fields found in Southeast Asia. The results of the trials of Trojan under these conditions indicated that the overall design of this vehicle may require further consideration before it could be used over this type of terrain. In this trial, Trojan is driven over a 5 feet 6 inch trench to observe the articulation of the vehicle. The vehicle is driven slowly over a step to observe the degree of whip produced by this type of obstacle. Special instrumentation was installed in W1 and W14 for cooling and drawbar trials at Innisfail. In this trial, W1, fully loaded, towed a Diamond T tractor under maximum torque conditions. This is normal seating for the Trojan in its APC role. With this seating removed, the carrier can be set up as a command vehicle or as an ambulance. Guide rails fitted to the floor of the carrier and a loading ramp enable the Wombat recoilless rifle to be carried in the vehicle. The barrel is anchored in the driver's compartment and the axle held by clamping attachments. Both APCs under trial were fitted with standard wading screens. The carrier crews, after some practice, were able to erect these screens quickly, but difficulty was experienced in lowering them so that the canvas fell into its correct folds. It was found that the machine gun was shielded by the screen. With the aid of troops, the screens could be erected and lowered quickly into their channels in the correct folds, but tactically, time might not be available to locate the folds accurately. Distortion of the channels into which the screens folded resulted from jungle running, when trees, branches, and vines caught and forced them out of shape. In its role as a personnel carrier, it was found that the time taken to evacuate the vehicle was acceptable, although it could be improved by providing an automatic locking device to hold the door open while the troops emerge. A circuit 9 miles long was used for beach trials, 6 miles being along the beach proper, and the remaining 3 miles along the sandy hinterland beyond the beach. Flotation trials were conducted over a rectangular course with an overall length of 1,400 yards. At the point where the vehicles became buoyant, they would often become immobilized in the mud. Steering became difficult until the vehicles were fully buoyant. W1, fully loaded, averaged 3.1 miles per hour, and W14, unloaded, 3.8 miles per hour. Both vehicles floated satisfactorily with some minor leakage, but at no time was the safety of either vehicle threatened. Unless the carriers approached the beach head-on, they were prone to bogging in the mud when the tracks touched bottom. W14 suffered some damage when it was being bulldozed from a bog near the shore. The trials of Trojan under hot, dry conditions were conducted at Mount Isa. This required a 684-mile journey from Innisfail. The schedule for each day's running was the same. The vehicles moved off at first light in order to cover as many miles as possible before the hottest part of the day. For many miles, the road consisted of nothing more than sets of vehicle tracks crossing parched and cracked black soil plains. The stretch from Julia Creek to Mount Isa was extremely rough and provided a severe test for wheeled and tracked vehicles alike. The noise of the forced draft ventilating fans subjected the troops to considerable fatigue. During the journey, an average speed of 25 miles per hour was maintained. Isa, physiological trials were carried out to augment the findings relating to the habitability of the Trojan under hot, dry desert conditions. Before embarking, the troops were required to run a distance of 640 yards, after which their pulse recovery rates were used as an indication of their physical fitness. During one trial, the troops were marched before being confined for 3 hours in the carriers. The purpose of the first trial was to note the sweat losses of the troops who were confined in Trojan during the hottest part of the day. Body weight losses, rectal, oral, and skin temperatures and pulse rates were determined. Carefully calibrated thermocouples were taped to the body of each trial subject. Another trial compared the effects on troops confined in Trojan under air-conditioned and forced draft ventilation with a similar group exposed to ambient temperatures. Here, a carrier fitted with an air conditioning unit moves out on a trial. Another trial was designed to observe pre- and post-confinement performance tests, oral temperature, and pulse rate. Following a 3-hour shutdown period, the troops had to negotiate hurdles and irregularly placed sleepers. Staggered tires provided another test of judgment. The ability of the soldier to balance on a rail after this exertion was noted. His pulse rate and ability to throw grenades and to use a rifle were also checked. The circuit for the automotive trials at Mount Isa was almost 6 miles long. 50% of the circuit included flat, stony surfaces with several rocky outcrops, dry creeks with soft sand and washaways with short, steep banks and rocky beds. The remainder was hilly with stony surfaces, patches of soft soil, steep gradients, and gullies with steep banks. In general, the course provided a severe test of the vehicle's ability to negotiate rough, hard going, steep gradients, and of their control on side slopes. These trials have provided valuable information for the designers of the FV432.